Hello and welcome to Polyglot Principles. My name is Modja and I'm a hyper polyglot who speaks 8 languages. Now this is the channel where I help I help ambitious language learners to go from intermediate to advanced in a language by giving them a deep and detailed understanding of the principles of language learning. So if you're an ambitious type of person, or someone who's not satisfied with mediocre results, you want to become really good. You're not interested in just being okay, getting by, communicating the language, but you're the sort of person who wants to get really good. And you're currently at the intermediate level or above the intermediate level, and you want to figure out how to become more advanced. If you're that sort of guy, then this is definitely the channel for you. In particular, if you're someone who likes to understand how things work, you're not comfortable with me just giving you a few quick tips. You want to understand the principles of language learning because you want to really get good at the language you're trying to learn. If you're that type of person, then this is the channel for you. And make sure to like, subscribe, hit the bell notification because the channel is designed specifically to help you get from intermediate to advanced in your target language. Alright, by the way, if you have any questions about how to go from intermediate to advanced, be sure to email me at polyglotprinciples@gmail.com. The email address can be found in the description of the video. Alright, let's dig into the material of today. The title of today's video is The 5 Enemies of Language Fluency. Right, so there do exist enemies of language learning. There are certain things which, if you continue to do them, will make it very difficult, if not impossible, for you to become fluent at your target language. And we're going to be talking about 5 of those enemies today. And as usual, I do have a question for you. Right? In your opinion, what are the enemies of fluency? What things, what actions, which if you continue doing them will almost guarantee that you're not going to become fluent in the language? Could you list at least 5 of those in the description below? Pause this video, go to the comment section, and type in what you think are the biggest enemies of fluency, the things that stop you from becoming fluent. And then after you've written them down, come back to this video and let me know and find out if your list agrees with my list. This would be an interesting exercise, and it would also be great for me to understand what you think and what really matters to you so I can serve you better. Alright, so pause the video, go right in the comment section. Right, the 5 mistakes and 5 enemies of fluency, and now you're back. Alright, so let's dig in here. Enemy number 1. The first enemy of fluency in a language is not identifying and fixing your mistakes. I mean, think about it for a while. What does it mean to become fluent in a language? Right? If you're becoming more fluent, if you're improving in a language, to improve means you are making less mistakes today than you made yesterday. So long as you make less mistakes today than you made yesterday, then you're improving, right? So what happens if you don't identify or you don't fix your mistakes? What are the consequences of that? One of them is obvious, isn't it? If you do not fix your mistakes, obviously you're not going to make less mistakes over time. This means that the best you can do is remain the same. That is, you're either going to be stuck in a plateau or you're going to get worse. You're definitely not going to get better if you're not fixing your mistakes. The consequence is clear, which is kind of weird. You might say, yeah, Modja, I know this is kind of obvious information. Of course I should identify and fix my mistakes. Now the reason I'm mentioning it is because although it's obvious and simple, it's very easy to get lost in details and not do it. Think about, for example, many people believe this. Many people believe that if you speak a language a lot, you're going to become fluent at the language. Right? This is only partially true. Right? The reality is, at the beginning of the language, if for example, you probably noticed this at the beginning of your target language. It was the more you spoke, the better you became. But then you reached a certain point around intermediate level or slightly above intermediate where you are speaking a lot but you aren't noticing any huge improvement. Right? And here's the reason why that was happening. It's very connected to not identifying your mistakes or not fixing your mistakes. At the very beginning, when you were a beginner, you didn't know much. So when you spoke, typically people are comfortable correcting you and telling you, hey, you don't say it this way, you say it like this. And so you improved. You got feedback about your mistakes, because maybe you spoke and maybe natives could not understand what you're saying. So naturally you notice, oh, I made a mistake, and you try to improve. But when you reach intermediate, the level which you're at, or above intermediate, what's going to happen is now you're able to communicate comfortably. People can understand what you're saying. So they don't actually need to interrupt you. So now you don't have any feedback about whether you're saying things correctly or not. Right? And this might also happen with your writing and so on. So what's going to happen is, now nobody's telling you what your mistakes are. And it's very easy to just continue to talk with many people, because after all, it worked in the past. You used to talk as a beginner and used to improve. But you get to this level where you don't know what mistakes you're making, nobody's correcting you, and you can continue speaking for a long time, months even, and you don't notice any fundamental improvement, right? You don't notice any improvement in skill level. You're not getting more fluent. I mean, an example that really puts this in clear perspective is, for example, you have your own mother tongue. Let's suppose it's English. You're a fluent, a native speaker of English. Okay. And let's say you've been speaking English this entire year. Are you definitely better at English this year than you were last year? I mean, I could take a personal example of myself. I speak English every single day. My English today is not significantly better than my English 1 year ago or 2 years ago. And yet I practice the language every single day. And what's the reason for that? It's very clear. Because I'm not putting in effort in making my English better. I'm comfortable with where my English is. Right? If I wanted to improve at my English, well, I'd have to figure out what my mistakes are and fix those mistakes. That's the only way I'm going to be able to improve, by fixing my mistakes. Right? And this is true with your own native language. You've noticed that you probably not improved much, especially if you're an adult. You probably haven't improved much compared to the last 2 years or more years. And it's exactly the same reason. You haven't taken the time to identify your mistakes. Or if you've identified your mistakes, then you haven't taken the time to fix them. Right. So, natural question is, well, what happens? What happens if you crush this enemy? What happens if you actually now start identifying and fixing your mistakes? What will that do for you? Well, the automatic benefit is that you'll become fluent. Whenever you get a mistake that you're making and you fix it, in that moment you have improved. So improvement is guaranteed. If you've not been obeying this principle of identifying and fixing your mistakes, right, then once you start doing it, you're going to start to notice great improvement, right, in your level of skill at the language. This is just natural, it's expected. This is one way to guarantee improvement, is by identifying your mistakes and fixing them. Okay, that being said, we have a natural question. Is there a reversal? Are there conditions under which it is okay not to be aware of your mistakes and not to fix them? Could there be situations where it's okay to remain ignorant in that way? And the answer is yes. For example, you're at the intermediate level, slightly advanced. You're making less mistakes than you used to, but the reality is you're still making a lot of mistakes. If somebody were to make you aware of all the mistakes you're making, you could be overwhelmed. Maybe you're making 100 mistakes. So, if you're making so many mistakes and you know that to improve you have to fix all of them, it can become overwhelming. Right? Someone could just decide, hey, look, I have to it's just too much work, all these mistakes I'm making, I don't know how to fix them. You can become overwhelmed and you can actually wind up quitting or not putting in as much effort as you need to because it's just too much. So, this is an example where becoming aware of your mistakes is actually making you practice less, right? Reducing your confidence, right? And that's making it very difficult for you to become more fluent. So there is a reversal. But what do you do under these conditions? What do you do when you have so many mistakes and you're feeling overwhelmed about how you're going to fix all of them? Well, there's a simple solution. You don't tackle all of the mistakes. Just find the biggest mistake. Or if you can't find the biggest mistake, find the mistake that is big enough, that you consider important to fix. Get your biggest mistake, let's just say, or a big mistake. And then just focus on that. Forget about the other mistakes. Simplify your life. The reason you're feeling perhaps overwhelmed is because you're looking at too many mistakes. You're trying to solve too many problems at the same time. Focus on one problem, your biggest mistake or a big mistake, and just zero in on fixing that. if you fix your biggest mistake or a big mistake, you're automatically going to notice improvement. Why? Because you've gotten rid of your biggest obstacle. Right? Since your biggest obstacle, you've gotten rid of your since you have gotten rid of your biggest obstacle, naturally you're going to make tremendous progress, right? Great progress, because now one of the things that has been blocking you is out of your way. So this is again another way to guarantee improvement. All right, let's move into the second. What is the second enemy? Enemy number 2 of fluency. Number 1 was not identifying and fixing your mistakes. Number 2 is your comfort zone. What is the comfort zone? You've probably heard of this. The comfort zone is just, if you're doing things in your comfort zone, it means you're comfortable. There are many activities, as provided you're not sick. There are many activities which are in your comfort zone. For example, eating is something in your comfort zone. It's not a struggle for you to eat. It's totally easy for you to get food and put it in your mouth, unless you're having some sort of medical complications. Walking is within your comfort zone. It's an easy thing to do. Talking could be an easy thing to do. There's all sorts of things you do that are easy. They're comfortable for you. All those things are within your comfort zone. Now, what we're saying that your comfort zone is an enemy. We're saying your comfort zone is an enemy of fluency. Why is that? When you're in your comfort zone, you feel comfortable, which means you're not challenged. If you're being challenged, you're not comfortable, by definition. So, by definition of being comfortable, you're comfortable, everything is easy for you, therefore it can't be challenging. Now, if you're not being challenged, you're not going to grow. It's as simple as that. Basically, growing, getting better at a language means that you're making less and less mistakes than you used to make. If you're practicing within your comfort zone, for example, you're reading texts that are super easy for you in the language, or you're listening to podcasts that are super easy for you in the language, what that means is that you're totally comfortable. If you're totally comfortable, then it means that you're not making any mistakes. If you're not making any mistakes, there are no mistakes you can't see any mistakes to correct. If you don't correct any mistakes, you're not going to improve. This is why it's important to challenge yourself, right? It's because if you challenge yourself, by definition, you're putting yourself in situations where you don't know what to do. If it's in terms of listening, you're listening to a podcast, let's say, where the information is, you have to struggle to understand what they're saying. When you're writing texts that are hard for you to write. If you're reading things that are hard for you to read. As a result, because it's difficult for you, you're making a lot of mistakes. And these mistakes are good news, because now you have something to fix. You fix these mistakes, you get better. This is the beauty of working outside of your comfort zone. And this is the curse of working within your comfort zone, because you never improve. The example I gave you before about your mother tongue, why it's now been, let's say, maybe in the last 3 years of speaking your mother tongue, you haven't gotten significantly better. Part of the reason is that you're very comfortable in your mother tongue. The activities you do in your mother tongue are very comfortable to you. Because they're comfortable, you're not making any mistakes. Or if you're making mistakes, you're not taking an effort to correct them, right? And so you're really screwed, right? And if you stay in your comfort zone, then obviously you can't improve. All right, I think I've beaten a dead horse here when it comes to your comfort zone. But there's something I need to caution you about the comfort zone. We're saying if you're too comfortable, you're not going to learn anything. You're not going to improve. But it's also, be wary of stretching yourself too much. If you're too uncomfortable, you're likely to get frustrated. It's also possible that you're going to quit. So for example, or you might just tune out the material. For example, I recall when I was at the beginning, when learning German, I disobeyed this principle. I was listening to a podcast that was way too complicated for me at the very beginning. I could barely understand a single sentence in the podcast. What I noticed was that over time, I just tuned the entire podcast out. My mind figured, hey, this podcast is too complicated. All of this stuff is nonsense, so I'm not going to pay attention anymore. I'm going to get lost in thought and focus on other things. Because I tuned out the podcast, I ended up not learning anything, or learning very little from the podcast, because I was not paying attention. The information was too hard, my mind got frustrated, and it gave up on the process altogether. So that can happen to you as well, if you do things that are too hard. So, what you really need to do is to find what is called the sweet spot. You need to practice intelligently. This means you want to do things that are not too hard, not too easy. Whatever language learning activity you do, it has to be out of your comfort zone, but not too far out of your comfort zone. If you're going to listen to a podcast, listen to a podcast that is not too easy, but not too hard that it overwhelms you. If you're going to write sentences, you're going to write about topics that are not too easy for you, but not too hard either. And so long as you stay within this sweet spot, you're guaranteed to improve. You're guaranteed to improve. So, natural question is there a reversal? Are there conditions under which it is in your best interest to stay within your comfort zone? Oh, by the way, when it comes to this whole thing about which I've been talking about, practicing within your sweet spot, practicing in such a way that you're not too comfortable and you're not overwhelming yourself a lot, if you really want to understand how to do this, I've actually made a video on the topic. The video is titled, How to Become Addicted to Language Learning. If that is something that interests you, please go to the description of this video. I have a link that shows you exactly how to set up your practices so that you're not in your comfort zone and so that it's not too overwhelming and so that you're always improving and getting better at the language. All right. But that being said, we're saying, are there conditions? Is there a reversal? Are there conditions under which actually losing to this enemy is in your best interest? Are there conditions under which staying in your comfort zone is actually in your best interest? And the answer is yes, there are such conditions. For example, let's suppose that you've lost motivation in the language, or for some reason you've not been practicing for a while. If you set up a complicated practice session for yourself, maybe you said, let's say you haven't been practicing for a while, and then you decide, okay, so tomorrow I'm going to start and I'm going to do practice writing in the language for 4 hours. That might be too much and scare you away. It might be wise. It's actually, this system definitely works. It might be wise if you've been rusty and you haven't been practicing for a while, maybe the next couple of sessions, make them within your comfort zone. Make them easy for you. The reason you do this is because if it's easy, you're not really going to be repelled by it. An easy practice, you're not going to resist doing something you're already good at. Watching a cartoon in a language that you already understand is not so hard. So that can get you into the habit of practicing the language again. But obviously, this staying in the comfort zone is not going to help you improve. So after a while, once you become comfortable, you get some confidence, maybe you've been doing some practice every day within your comfort zone, now you feel a bit of confidence, you can now begin to increase the difficulty, making the practice more and more challenging, thus guaranteeing that you're improving. So that was enemy number 2. What's enemy number 3? Enemy number 1 was not identifying and fixing your mistakes. Enemy number 2 was your comfort zone. The third enemy of fluency is distrusting your intuition. So you have an intuition, you have instincts. For example, when you speak your native language, English, whatever your mother tongue is, what you're going to notice is that you don't spend your time worrying about, like for example, when you're speaking, you don't spend your time worrying about what word should I use, how should I conjugate this verb, am I using the correct grammar? You don't do that. Instead, you just speak. Your mind gives you just the right things to say just show up in your mind. A word shows up in your mind and you use that word. That's all you do. Even when writing, you just write. You don't spend time second guessing your writing. If you read something, you rarely spend time trying to question, have I read this correctly? You just trust your reading. You have instincts in the language. The instinct is like a feeling that tells you that this is the right thing to do. Usually you follow your intuition. When you're in your own native language, you follow your intuition in speaking, reading, listening, and writing. But it sometimes happens when you're learning a language that you begin to second guess yourself. You become super critical, which means that as you're speaking, you're questioning yourself. Am I saying this correctly? Am I conjugating the verb correctly? How am my mouth? Am I pronouncing things correctly? All these kinds of thoughts, for example, when you're speaking, what's the effect of them? It's not going to make your speaking ability better. You're actually going to speak way below your normal ability. So this is the most negative effect of not trusting your intuition. When you start questioning yourself, when you start second guessing yourself, the quality of your work, you perform below your skill level. Just to really bring this point home, think about, for example, in your own target language when you did interviews, right? You had a couple of interviews. So in your interviews, maybe you did some job interview in your target language. And when you're doing this interview, you might have found yourself stuttering, stammering. Maybe you are finding it hard to even say a single sentence, right, in a language that you're already good at. Obviously, the problem is not the language. The problem is not that you don't understand your mother tongue. The issue was that when you got into the interview, you were so obsessed with speaking perfectly. You were trying very hard to say the right things. And because you are trying super hard, you ended up saying wrong things or having sentences that don't make any sense. You ended up performing way below your normal level, right? Your normal level of speech, let's say, in your target language. And this is the effect of not trusting your intuition. Because if you had trusted your intuition, if you had trusted yourself to say the right things, you would have said the right things. But because you're trying to second guess things, trying to say things perfectly, the nerves and all that, boom, you underperformed, right? And look, if you think about it, if you're not able, Sadhguru, the great Indian guru says, in this life, if you fail to do what you cannot do, that's understandable, that's okay. But if you fail to do something that you can do, that's a tragedy. So basically, when you second guess yourself and you distrust your own intuition, what tends to happen is you end up creating a tragedy. You end up performing way worse than you're capable of performing. It's okay to not perform well because you are not able to perform well. But not performing well, performing way below, performing less than what you could do, that sucks. And there's a simple way. There's a simple way to solve it. You trust your intuition. Now, just to get really to really understand how this works, your mind is divided into two parts. You have the conscious mind and you have the unconscious mind. Your conscious mind takes care of, is in charge of thinking, questioning things, imagining things, second guessing things. That's your conscious mind. Your unconscious mind is in charge of a lot of automatic activities. For example, breathing. Your entire respiratory system is taken care of by the conscious mind. Eating, your digestive system is taken care of by your conscious mind. Almost everything you do in your body, regulation of salt, sugar, whatever, all of it is done by the subconscious mind. So in a sense, the subconscious mind is super intelligent. Think about how intelligent you have to be in order to run this physical body correctly. Your subconscious mind is very intelligent and it's very good at performing automatic activities. So, for example, think about breathing. If you had to consciously breathe, you can breathe consciously or you can breathe unconsciously. You could let the subconscious breathe for you. If you try to breathe consciously, it's not as smooth and as good as if you just let the subconscious system breathe for you, because the subconscious mind is very, very intelligent. And the subconscious mind is really your intuition. When you let it work, like whenever you start second guessing yourself, you're second guessing your intuition. You're second guessing your own intelligence. So certain activities, like imagine you're riding a bicycle. Riding a bicycle is an activity that is done by your subconscious mind. If you started to think consciously about, holding the handlebars and pedaling and the movement of your legs and the movement of your chest and how the wind feels on your face, if you started to consciously try to ride a bike, you're very likely going to crash, because your conscious mind is not intelligent enough to handle all the details that are necessary to ride a bike correctly. The best way, if you already know how to ride a bike, the best way to ride the bike is to just trust yourself. Just let yourself just ride the bike. Don't try to overthink things. Don't think through things. Just ride the bike. Trust yourself to do the right things. And so this principle in particular is key when it comes to language learning, because learning a language, the skill of language is, a lot of it is automatic, and it's best done by the unconscious. The subconscious is better at, for example, speaking. Think about what is involved in speaking. You have to open your mouth in a certain way. You have to move out air in a certain way. You have to move your tongue in a certain way. There's so many details involved. Push air out of your lungs. There's so many details involved that basically the best part of your mind to speak is the unconscious, subconscious mind. For example, right now I'm just speaking. I'm not thinking about all of the pronunciation, all the details, all the grammar, none of that. I'm just trusting myself to say it. And that's what the subconscious mind is good at. Whenever you start to question yourself, what you're doing is you're trying to get your conscious mind to do something that is not good at. Your conscious mind is not good at dealing with so many details or handling too much complexity. And as a result, what's going to happen is if you decide to speak or you decide to write or you decide to listen and you're second guessing yourself, you're basically, your conscious mind is interfering with the subconscious. You're not trusting your own intuition. As a result, you're underperforming, performing way below your actual potential. So the key here is to trust your own intuition. Don't get in the way of your own intelligence. Now, that being said, a natural question to ask is there a reversal? But is it always a bad thing, for example, to distrust my intuition? Can my intuition get things wrong? And the answer is yes. Your intuition can get things wrong. For example, when you started your intuition in your own native language is very good because you spent a lot of time practicing the language. Most of the time, if you say a sentence, it's correct. Intuitively, or if you say that something is spelled this way, very likely it's correct. That's if you spend a lot of time developing your writing ability. But, for example, let's look at your target language. At the very beginning, when you knew nothing about your language, your intuition about the language was wrong. Almost every sentence that came out of your mouth was wrong. Your intuition was totally off. But because you're now at the intermediate level or more than intermediate level, suddenly your intuition now is better than it used to be. There's a lot of things which, if you feel they're right, they're right. But there's a lot of things you're getting wrong also, because you're not fluent at the language yet. So a lot of things which you think are correct are wrong. Your intuition is off. This is why, of course, you need to second guess or question yourself. But I want to distinguish between two things. I want to distinguish between practice and performance. Let's get a perfect example. Consider a basketball player. A basketball player during practice sessions is going to be working with his coach. And maybe he shoots the ball in a particular way. Him and the coach are going to second guess. He's going to second guess himself. He's going to question how he's holding the ball, how he's moving his body, his form, how he jumps. All those things will be questioned and criticized. Here him and his coach are using their conscious mind. They're second guessing, they're questioning everything about his technique because they want to improve it. Then the coach might tell him, hey, you hold the ball this way. You don't hold it this way. And then he'll practice whatever the move is, whatever the shooting style is. He'll practice it and practice it and practice it. And what's eventually going to happen is that the more he practices the correct form, the better his intuition gets about shooting the ball. But that's during practice. During practice, it's okay. There's no way he's going to improve if he doesn't. There's no way he's going to improve if he doesn't question his current skill. This is natural, right? This is obvious. However, when it comes to game time, when it is actually time to perform, now the story is totally different, you see, right? Because if he starts to second guess himself during a game, if he starts to question himself during a game, what is going to happen is that he's not going to play at his best, and they're likely to lose the game as a result. Or at least they're not going to get the points they would have gotten. During practice time, he questions his instincts, he practices, he hones things. When it's time to play, he plays. He trusts his instincts, he trusts his intuition. This is exactly the same thing with language learning. Right? You want to separate practice from performance. When there is a time to question your grammar. You question your grammar, you do some exercises, you analyze your speaking, you question your speaking, you make corrections. That is all practice. But when you get in front of people to speak, or when you're speaking with somebody, or when you're writing something, you turn off the critic. You just trust your instincts. Obviously, what you're going to do is not going to be perfect, but you're going to perform to the best of your ability when you trust your instincts. And then later, after the performance, you can analyze your performance. Now you're in practice mode. Correct mistakes, practice, drill things, and then when you have to perform again, you trust your instincts. This is the way to guarantee that you're always performing at your best, but you're also always getting better. All right. So that was enemy number 3, distrusting your intuition. So enemy number 1 was things that are stopping you from becoming fluent is you're not identifying and correcting your mistakes. You're in your comfort zone. You're distrusting your intuition was number 3. Enemy number 4 is walking before crawling. This basically means you're starting to do complex things before you've mastered the simple things. You see, the way life is set up, complex things are always made up of simple things. A huge tree, is made up of it comes from a small seed. A huge building is made up of bricks. A complicated planet like the Earth is simply made up of atoms. A complicated philosophical text is made up of words. Complicated words are made up of letters. This is how things work. Complicated things are built from simplicity. However, if somebody decides, so there's 2 ways to approach things. You could start from understanding the simple things in order to understand the complex things. This means that, for example, when you're learning a language, instead of listening to text, reading a text that's very complicated for you, you read a text that is simple for you to read. That would mean you're moving from simplicity, and then as you get better, you continue to read more and more complicated texts until you get to whatever desired complexity. The other approach is to go backwards. That is, you start from a complicated text and you just want to understand the complicated text. Now, the temptation to do this is clear, isn't it? Some people think that if you do complicated things, like if you listen to a complicated podcast very early, then you're going to improve faster than someone who started by listening to easy things, children's things, and so on. So people think that sometimes complexity, starting with complicated material, is actually going to make you improve faster, or become more fluent quickly. I actually disagree with this, because this is what I'm calling walking before crawling. Instead of crawling first and then walking, you're deciding to walk, right? And then you're like, you're gonna skip the crawling stage. So I think there's babies who actually do this, but it's just the concept that's important to us. It means going in like a kind of reverse order. Well, here's the truth. If you start by doing things in a language that are very complicated for you, what's going to happen is that you're not going to understand those complicated things until you understand the simple things of which the complex thing is made. If let's say at the beginning of your language learning journey, or somewhere in the middle, instead of reading a text that's easy for you to understand, let's say reading a children's book, you decided to read Descartes, let's say a complicated philosophical text. In order to understand that complicated philosophical text, you're still going to have to understand the sentences, the simple sentences of which it is made, the simple words of which that make up the entire complicated philosophical text. So basically, you're not going to escape. Just because you've started by working with complex things, you're not going to escape having to learn the simple parts that make up the complicated thing. So if you start with the complex, you're anyway going to have to learn the simple stuff first. So why are you wasting your time rushing the complex? Why not learn the simple stuff first and then use that foundation to understand complicated stuff? So this is the first thing. It doesn't make sense. You're not escaping simplicities. You're still going to have to learn them anyway. And the big disadvantage with starting with very complicated, like you listen to very complicated material, you write very complicated things, you read very complicated things, and by complicated I mean complicated for you. You consider them to be a real struggle, and it's very hard for you. You barely make it's really, really hard for you by your own judgment. It's too complicated what you're doing. Well, if you do that, what's going to happen is that, likely, not always, but what's really going to happen is you find yourself becoming frustrated because you're doing something that is too hard for you. You're going to be frustrated, you're probably going to be overwhelmed, and most people are going to give up under those conditions. It's going to be too hard, and you might even end up giving up. Right? All because you started by things that were too hard, too complicated for you, thinking that it's a shortcut, when in effect you're still gonna have to learn the simple stuff that's necessary in order to understand the complicated thing. So the better approach is to start from simple to complex. If you understand, let's say you get a children's cartoon and you watch a children's cartoon that's simple, and you understand everything in that children's cartoon, understanding that content, simple content, is going to give you the right foundation to understand more complicated stuff. If you start by learning how to write simple sentences, then that will give you the right foundation to learn how to write complicated sentences. If you understand how to pronounce simple sounds in the language, just the right sounds, that will make it easier for you to pronounce sentences and words and so on. So, doing simple stuff gives you the foundation to do more complicated stuff. But of course, the key is that let it not be too simple, because otherwise you're in your comfort zone. It has to be within your sweet spot. Not too easy, and it also can't be too hard. If it's too hard, it's again overwhelming, as we've just said. So you want to work within your sweet spot. And as I mentioned before, I have made a video on this topic on how to set up practices so that you're not doing things that are too complicated, you're not doing things that are too easy, but you're getting the right mix, the kind of mix that guarantees improvement. And the title of the video is called How to Become Addicted to Language Learning. Just go to the description of this video and you'll find the link to it, How to Become Addicted to Language Learning. Now, by the way, before I continue here, I usually make these videos every Monday at 8 a.m. Central African time. I publish a new video that's designed to help ambitious language learners like you get a deep and detailed understanding of language learning, right? Thereby enabling you to go from intermediate to advanced. If this is something that interests you and you're liking this video so far, please give us a thumbs up, like this video, hit the subscribe button, and hit the bell notification. That way you'll be notified whenever I publish a new video. And by the way, if you have a question or you disagree with something I'm saying, please email me. I would like to hear from you. And my email address is polyglotprinciples@gmail.com. Also, the email address can be found in the description below, polyglotprinciples@gmail.com. All right, let's continue. So we're talking about walking before crawling, doing things that are too complicated, right? And what we've learned so far is it's better to start from simplicity and then you start doing more and more complicated stuff. The reason is, whereas if you start with complicated stuff, you become overwhelmed. You can become stressed because it's hard. If you do things that are within your sweet spot, things that are simple for you to do, you're not going to be stressed. But you're still going to stretch and challenge yourself. And whenever you conquer these small challenges, you're going to become more and more confident. A good example is something I heard. It's like, I think some scientists did an experiment in a lab. So what they did is they had a big rat and they had a small rat. And what they did is they got this small rat and they got it to fight. The small rat was fighting other rats. It kept fighting rats, but the game was rigged. So the rats that were fighting with the small rat were drugged, so they couldn't really fight. But the small rat didn't know that. So whenever the small rat saw the big rats, I think they were mice, whenever the small mouse saw the big, fought against the big mice, it won. Because they were drugged, but it didn't know, so it just fought them and won. And then after a while in the experiment, they got the small mouse and they got it to fight against a big mouse, but this time the big mouse was not drugged. Guess what the rat did? The mouse still attacked and kicked the shit and defeated the big mouse. The big mouse which was not drugged. The reason it did that was because it had collected a couple of successes. It fought against other rats, other big rats, all of them which were drugged, and it won. Each win gave this rat more and more confidence, until finally it had enough confidence to face a big rat that is not drugged. And that is the power of accumulating small successes. If you start by doing simple things, you read a text that's in your sweet spot, it's a bit challenging but not too challenging. What's going to happen is that you're going to conquer that challenge. You're going to understand the text. If you understand the simple text, this will give you courage and confidence to attack an even bigger text, and so on. And eventually you'll find yourself reading very complicated texts after a while, and without having to feel frustrated or stressed. This is really the better way to go. But that being said, are there advantages to walking before crawling? Are there advantages of starting from complex to simple? The answer is yes. If you're able to stick through complex things, if you're able to stick to reading a complex text, or if you're able to stick to listening to something that's very complicated, because you're facing great challenges, your mind is going to become tougher. The first advantage is mental toughness. Whenever you do something that's really complicated and you stick to complications, your mind has to adapt in order to help you survive. So you're definitely going to become mentally tough. And the other thing to note is that even if you decide to just start from complex, eventually you're going to learn the simple stuff anyway. So that's another thing to take into account. You could still achieve the result if you started with the complex, doing things that are very complicated for you, provided you have the grit to stick to it. But it's not necessary, and it's not even the best, most intelligent way. All right. So that's enemy 4. Enemy 1 to fluency in a language was not identifying and fixing your mistakes. Enemy 2 was staying in your comfort zone. Enemy 3 was distrusting your own intuition. Enemy 4 was walking before crawling, doing complicated things first instead of starting with simple things. Enemy 5 is unautomated systems. Okay, what do I mean by that? What is a system? A system is just a series of steps. And basically what systems allow us to do, series of actions, just a set of actions is really just a system. And what systems allow us to do is they allow us to reliably solve problems that happen again and again and again and again. For example, almost every single multiple times a minute you need to breathe. There's the problem of getting air from the outside into your body. And there's also the problem of getting air that's inside your body into the outside. This is a problem that your body has to solve consistently, frequently. Because if it is not solved, you're going to die. If you don't take the next breath, you're dead. So, because we have a recurring problem that happens over and over again, we have a system to deal with that problem. The system is called the respiratory system. The respiratory system helps you to solve the problem of breathing. This problem that happens again and again and again and again. Another example of a system is your digestive system. How do you get food and convert it into the human body? How do you get food and turn it into the physical body? That is the task of our digestive system. It will take an apple, you eat the apple, and the apple will turn into a human being. In order to do that, to go from an apple to a human being, there is a system. That system is called your digestive system. And if you notice carefully, the digestive system, and again, this problem of needing to convert food into the human body is a problem that needs to be solved again and again. It's a problem that occurs repeatedly. If that problem is not solved, you'll die of starvation. So the system is helping you to reliably solve a problem that happens again and again and again, provided that you provide it with food, obviously. And so life is full of systems. A computer is a system, it allows you to, maybe if you're someone who likes to write, it allows you to turn your thoughts and put them in written form on the screen. And the computer allows you to reliably do that. So the computer is a system. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up, and by the way, if you notice, breathing, the respiratory system is automatic. I mean, you can breathe consciously, but you don't have to. Even if you don't try to breathe, you breathe automatically. So the respiratory system is automated. The digestive system is also automated. All you do is eat, but the rest of the process, how the food, the apple is transformed into the human body, that is not done by you. It's not a conscious thing. It's automatically done by the system in your body, your subconscious. So we have systems that are automated. But this sounds kind of abstract to you. What does this have to do with language learning? Give me a moment. Let me drink something. So this is maybe too abstract for you. You're asking, what does this have to do with language learning? Well, in languages also, we have problems that need to be solved again and again and again. For example, in any language you speak, you're going to want to talk about things that will happen, things that will happen in the future. You might want to talk about things that happened already. You might want to talk about things that are happening right now. Or you might want to talk about things that may happen, imaginary things. Or you might want to transform your thoughts into writing. All of those are problems that need to be solved. And they need to be solved repeatedly. Because you're not going to want to talk about the present just once. You probably want to do it many times in the future. So because this problem occurs again and again, we need a system for it. And we invented systems for that. To talk about things that happen in the present, we invented the present tense system. To talk about things that happen in the future, we invented the future tense system. To talk about things that may happen, we invented the imaginary tense system, otherwise known as the conditional tense system, and so on. So, these systems, for example, the present tense system, the past tense system, and there's so many systems, they allow us to solve problems that occur again and again. If you understand the present tense system, then it means that whenever you have to talk in the present, you're able to do it, because you have a system for dealing with this kind of situation. Now, the power of this is, if you can make these systems automatic, if you can practice the present tense to the point where it's automatic, if you can automate the present tense, what that means is that whenever you have to express an idea in the present, you don't have to think about it. It will happen automatically. What that means is that you automatically become more fluent. So this is the primary benefit of automating a system, a language system. The more language systems you have, the more language systems you automate, the more fluent you are at the language. And of course, vice versa is true. The less systems you have automated, the less fluent you are. Because, for example, let's suppose that you don't know the present, you haven't mastered the present tense system, you haven't mastered the future tense system. It means that whenever you have to talk about things that happen in the present tense, things that happen in the present, you're going to struggle, you're going to look for words, you're going to start consciously conjugating things. Everybody's going to notice that you're not fluent. Or if you haven't automatized, if you haven't automated the future tense, what's going to happen is, if the future tense is unautomated for you, what's going to happen is whenever you need to talk about the future, you're going to struggle, you're going to sweat, you're going to look for the right words, and so on. You're going to take too long to say something. Or when somebody says something to you in the future tense, you're not going to understand it. Or you're going to spend a lot of time trying to figure out what they've said, and by the time you figure it out, they've already talked about many other things which you missed. So, when you don't automate systems, the systems that are not automated limit your fluency. They stop you from getting better. And of course, the converse is true. The more systems you automate, the more fluent you become at a language. Now, you might ask a natural question, well, how do I automate systems? How do you do it? How do I make systems automatic? And what systems should I make automatic? This is a good question. I've actually made a video on the topic. It's called, and it talks about, for example, automating systems, especially grammar systems. Well, this video is called How to Learn Grammar Like a Boss. So, How to Learn Grammar Like a Boss, there's a link to that in the description. If you click on it, you'll be able to see exactly which systems you should, how to figure out which systems you should automate and how to automate these systems. It's not necessarily obvious how to do it. Okay, so that being said, what are the disadvantages of not automating a system? Oh, actually, there's something I'd really like to emphasize about this whole subject of unautomated and automated systems. A good way to show it is consider a respiratory system. Because you're able to breathe automatically, that frees you up, that frees up your attention to do other things that are important to you. So, for example, you could not be, if you had to breathe, to consciously control your respiratory system, you'd not be able to listen to me right now. All your focus would be on breathing in, breathing out. There'll not be any space or attention left for you to listen to what I'm saying or respond or think about it. The reason you're able to listen to me right now is because your body has automated the breathing system. Because the breathing system is automatic and you don't have to think about it, now you have space to do other things. You can talk, you can read books, and so on. This is the same with language learning. If you automate a system, if you automate any system, like the present tense or any other system, once you've automated it, now it means you're doing it automatically. You don't have to think about it. So now this frees up your attention to tackle other problems in the language. Right? If you've automated your systems, now you can spend time worrying about how to say things, like more worrying about the ideas you're trying to express. But you're no longer thinking about grammar, because grammar is now automatic for you. So this is the power of unautomated systems. And by the way, look, if you like these ideas I'm sharing, look, I've actually written them down in detail. If you want to really see them in written form, because the written form is actually more detailed than what I'm saying. So if you want to see that, just go to the description below. There's a link. And if you click on this link, you'll get a detailed description, detailed notes of everything I've talked about in this video, about the enemies, the 5 enemies of language fluency. So we've been talking about unautomated systems, and the natural question is, hey, are there situations under which it is good? Is there a reversal? Are there situations under which it is good for you to have unautomated systems? The answer is, you really can't function without unautomated systems. But if you did not try to automate any systems, and all you did was practice, it would take you a while, but eventually the systems will become automated. A good example is children. Children don't consciously spend time trying to automate various systems. They don't spend time trying to drill the present tense until it's automatic, or drilling prepositions until they're automatic. But after a while, the kids end up using these structures, these systems automatically anyways. So if you don't automate your language systems, and you continue to practice the language correctly, eventually they'll still become automatic. But it will take longer than if you had identified the systems that are important, put in the effort to automate them. That would go much faster, because you're not a kid. You could learn a language way faster than a kid. In fact, a kid is not a standard for you. So actually I made a video on that also. The video is called Why Kids Suck at Language Learning. Why Kids Suck at Language Learning. So if this is something that interests you, I'll add a link to it in the description also. I was telling you why you should not set your standard to the level of kids. You actually can learn a language much faster as an adult than as a kid. Alright, so we've really covered the 5 enemies of fluency. Number 1 was not identifying and fixing your mistakes. Number 2, your comfort zone is holding you back from being fluent. The third one was distrusting your intuition. The 4th enemy was walking before crawling. The 5th enemy was unautomated systems. So again, if you'd like to get to understand these things in detail, just go to the description of this video, and I have a link in which I've given detailed notes on the ideas that I've expressed in this video. Now, as mentioned before, I make a video every Monday at 8 AM Central African Time. I publish a new video, and the video is designed to help you go from intermediate to advanced in your target language. And I go really deep into things. So if you want to not miss out on those videos, make sure to like this video, give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and hit the bell notification. That way you'll be notified whenever I publish a new video. Otherwise, and if you have any questions, by the way, don't forget to send me an email. Just go to the description of this video. My email address is there. It's called polyglotprinciples@gmail.com. So you could send me an email, ask me a question, disagree with me, encourage me, whatever you want to do. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope to catch you in the next one. Bye.